Okay, I get it. You dream of making indie games full-time, or perhaps you're already making your game, but you find yourself constantly changing your game idea, quitting your project, or worse, maybe you feel like game dev is just not for you. Trust me, I've actually been there myself. In fact, I was at a very low point when I was working on my second game, Once Upon a Coma. This was back in 2018. But the guest of this podcast, William Dubé, he came in at just the right time. Will is the creator of Jotun, Sundered, Spiritfarer, 33 Immortal, and At Fate's End. We're gonna discuss why game dev is such an intense gamble and how to handle the stress of it all. We're gonna discuss how to stay motivated, planning and scheduling so you don't quit your game, why game dev is likely going to be a struggle, how to recover from a bad game launch, why handcrafted games are so important in this AI age, marketing your game, and what he's learned from releasing viral games and not so viral games. And by the way, look, I get it. This all seems like so much to handle as an indie game dev. It can all feel like you're juggling a million things. Many of them feel completely irrelevant to actually getting your game done, but they are required. That's where today's sponsor comes in, Skywork.ai. Skywork is an AI platform that feels like having an entire creative team inside of a single app. I honestly can't think of a more dynamic career than game development. You kind of have to juggle everything from actual development, right? All the way to just business stuff, creating pitch decks, documents, and spreadsheets. Skywork connects all of this. All of these things you're juggling into a single workflow. You can simply drop in an idea and instantly get a script or a polished document, full slides, and even a web page ready to share. As game devs, we know how much time disappears switching between apps, rewriting content, or just researching. Skywork, it simplifies this and ultimately takes that pain right away. It's kind of like hitting, fast forward on all of your creative processes so you can stay focused on building your game instead of juggling dozens of other tools and tasks. Try it yourself today with the link in the description or the pinned comment, and you get access to the exclusive offer for this channel. You launch a game and maybe it doesn't do well, and you panic, or you're tempted to panic, and then 2 months later you realize you're fine and that everything's okay. Is that true in game dev?
I mean, if it happened to you, then it's true. Yeah, and it's happened to us as well. Like, we've interviewed people before who used to be like police officers or like ambulance drivers, and like that kind of perspective just helps remind us, what we're actually doing here. Like, yes, it's important. We're making really great games that a lot of people love, and it's important for the people in the studio and keeping everyone fed and housed, like
exactly. That's a lot of pressure.
Having a job is important, and obviously, but we have to remember that we're not mission critical. We're making video games for a living. If our games don't work or whatever, people aren't going to die. It's like it's not the same level of of responsibility in that sense. Like, the worst that can happen is that we'll have like an internet mob come after us or something, or people will be disappointed or that kind of stuff. And obviously we're ambitious people. We want to make great games and we want to have a great studio and all that. And that really drives us. We're here to make the best games we can possibly make and have the best studio that we can possibly have. But yeah, it's kind of, sometimes you have to take a step back and have that, remind yourself, we're making a luxury entertainment product, that's supposed to be fun, that's supposed to be played. And of course, different studios have different objectives. Different companies have different objectives as well. Obviously, if you're in a small business, a small studio, your stresses will be different than if you're working for a publicly traded AAA studio, and that's going to change a lot of stuff there. But yeah, I mean, that's really, that's how I see it. Yeah,
it seems like you view making games, obviously I'm sure you view it as an artistic endeavor because it's a craft, but do you view game development with a sort of, try to view it with like an objective business oriented lens? I mean, isn't that kind of what your job is as a CEO?
Yeah, absolutely. My job as a CEO is absolutely that, is to, the way it works for us anyways, is to match the creative with the commercial. Like, we are a we are a business, you know. And even though I was just saying that, like, you know, making games is not as, you know, is not as important as saving lives, for us at the studio, it's still like super important for us, and it's our craft, it's our professional life. It's, you know, a big part of the hours we live, you know.
Exactly.
So it's super important for us, and we want to do things well. And, you know, the games that we make are very important to us and very important to the players who play them. Like, and we have that proof, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, coming back to the question, yeah, the creative and the commercial, both of those are super important. As our marketing and publishing director likes to say, money can be exchanged for goods and services. So, you know, it's the lifeblood of our company. If our games aren't doing well, if they aren't selling,
yeah,
then we're not paying for our salaries. You know, that's the bottom line. So you have to do that. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to make very creative games that have been important to us, you know, us internally on the team first and foremost, and then try and put that through the filter of the market and be like, okay, well, this is our vision. This is what we want to do. This is how we want to make something that's different, that's important to us. Is there an audience for that? Is there something, you know, do we think we can actually sell this game? Because we're not a purely artistic studio either, right? And that's fine. A lot of people make games for different reasons.
Well, you know, when I look at your website, it's like, and I look at your portfolio, it looks like you guys are so artistic, you know, you're so focused on, I would say, 2D narrative action games. Would you say that's what your focus is?
Yeah, except our last game is a 33-player co-op, micro MMO beast. But yeah, I know, absolutely. We're definitely most known for Spiritfarer.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, you know, there's local co-op in the game, but it's primarily a single-player narrative experience. And yeah, the art side of things is super important for us. It's a core. You know, if I put it into corporate speak, it's a core part of our brand identity, you know, as a studio. But if I put it more like human terms, it's like we're excited about art and about beauty and about, you know, games that do stand out, and you know, the art that our artists and animators and everyone on our team make, and the music and everything has always been, you know, really key to our success, and it's one of the strong points of our studio. And I'd say that's, you know, if there's like one through line throughout our studio, it's the 2D art. Obviously, it kind of goes beyond that as well, but that's definitely the easiest from afar to kind of pick up on and say, like, oh, what is Thunder Lotus? Oh, they make, you know, 2D games. You know?
Well, you seem so like I think there's so many people listening right now, and I used to be this way, where, you know, making games was this sort of panicked, artistic, pure, passionate hobby. It's not a business. It's not something that you should approach with a business mindset. And I found that caused a ton of anxiety when I used to have that mindset. My mindset now is like, well, I got kids, I got a mortgage, I got team members, I got contractors, I got to pay people, right? Yep. I got a publisher who's got to be satisfied. And so that actually, weirdly enough, calms me and makes me more relaxed, because it's a much more practical sort of it's like an equation, as opposed to like a religious thing. I don't know the right word, but like making games used to be kind of a religious experience for me, and that caused a ton of pressure and anxiety. Do you kind of know what I'm saying there, or?
Absolutely. I think it also touches on something that's part of my journey, or that I think is pretty, it's important as an entrepreneur, or when you start a business. And I think it's the same for if you're starting, you know, an artistic endeavor as well. But when you start something, that thing is part of you, right? And your identity exists very strongly related to that thing. So in my case, if I can give the example of myself, when I started Thunder Lotus, you know, Thunder Lotus was a huge part of who I considered myself as a person. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years later, several, you know, visits to the psychologist and different transitions and, you know, different life things. Well, now Thunder Lotus is no longer me, is no longer who I am. Thunder Lotus is a part of who I am, but I'm also I also, part of me is my family and my friends and, other stuff and other important things in my life as well. But when I was 25, which is when I started the studio, I was with my girlfriend, still today. We were together at the time too, but it was like, well, my life was her, my friends, my family, and the business. But obviously the business was a disproportionate part of who I was and how I viewed myself as an individual too. So I think that has something to do with it as well. When you get to like, I'm 36, so we're about the same age. And, obviously you've gone through a lot of different things in your life and you've had these different experiences, and you kind of understand that, you as a person are not only defined by this studio that you created or this business that you created or this art that you created. So I think that's part of that change there. But I think also bringing it back to game dev, I think what people, and I've been saying this for years and years and years and years, but I think people who start game studios or want to make their first game or whatever don't understand the difference between making a video game and making a studio. And those are two very different things. And it kind of comes back to the art versus commercial balance. Obviously, all this is my opinion, but I think that a lot of people start making a game without understanding what they're actually making or why they're making something. So if you have that kind of artistic, feverish drive to make something, that can be a huge driver. I know tons of devs who've put out their games that way and who've sacrificed a lot of things, including their own health, to get those games out of the door. But for us, it's always been about balancing the two. It's about saying, okay, what can we make that's important to us? We've always wanted to make games that we thought were great for ourselves, for the players, and all that. But how do we balance that against our business needs and our business imperatives and our survival as a business? So that's where I'd say, like, I think it's really important to know why you're making a game. So if you're a hobbyist and this is like, oh, I've always wanted to make a game, and I have this idea for this awesome thing, and it's not, I don't need this game to work for me to survive in our society. Then that's a very different thing, rather than, oh, I have a mortgage, I have to pay for daycare and school, etc. And I need this to work commercially, or even just you have no responsibilities, but you want to make something that works commercially. It comes down to what your objectives are and what you want. Do
you have an opinion on what the best motive is to make a game? I was listening to something from Jubilee. They always post these spicy YouTube videos, and I won't get into the politics of it, but it was like capitalist versus socialist kind of thing. And they were talking about motivation and how survival is a really good motivation for capitalism, because you want to survive, you want to eat, you want to pay your mortgage, and that creates innovation. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on, do business limitations and business parameters, like you barely have any money, right? Or you're living paycheck to paycheck. Does this help creativity or does this stifle creativity? Now, obviously, that's a very binary question. I also asked Pawnee Pants this when he came on the podcast, and we had a really interesting discussion about how I personally feel like if I had $20 million in the bank and I lived on the beach, I don't think I would have as much motivation to create great games. I'm curious if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think it comes down to motivation. What are your motivations, right? I think obviously survival is a very strong motivator. Like it's a very, very powerful thing, and that's it's a very, you can look at startup survival percentages and stuff like that, and it's something like 90% of startups fail within the first 2 years or something. I don't know if they don't quote me on those numbers, but it's in that sort of ballpark, right? And for games, it's probably even worse.
It's
like
probably
how many studios make it to their second game? It's probably worse than that. So I think that's a super strong motivator. If you were motivated by commercial success and then you achieve commercial success, then you won't be motivated to make another game, right? And I think if you are comfortable, if you have 20 million in the bank and you're living on a beach somewhere, it's going to be a bit harder to get that motivation going. If the motivation was
Right.
financial one. But if that motivation is something else, making a great game, winning that game award, making the best of the time you have on this planet type thing, that's what I often say too, to when we have discussions in the studio. It's like you have a limited number of years in your professional life.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with those years? Do you want to go make 5 AAA games, or do you want to make I don't know, probably more, hopefully more, sometimes not necessarily now, but it used to be more indie games in your life, and trying to, kind of pump those out. And it really comes out to that creative urge and your ambitions and all that. So we're in a fortunate spot now as a studio where we have had success, but still the motivating factor for us is to make not great games, to make really, really, really great games, and to do that to the best of our ability as a team. And we have constraints, we have we're pretty definitely on the bigger side for an indie studio, but we still have constraints. We have team sizes that we want to stay within. We have budgets we need to respect. We have timelines that we miserably fail to hit and stuff. But
always.
But yeah, I mean that's if the driver, I mean it depends on the motivation of each person and all that. And I think you can be motivated by several different things.
I think that's what makes a good entrepreneur. And by the way, I think obviously you and I would agree that making games is an entrepreneurial thing, right?
Yep. It's
artistic, of course, but it should be entrepreneurial. At least I think it should be, in the sense that it's like, build a profitable product, If it's profitable, it means that people enjoy it. I think that that's a pretty standard rule of thumb, right? This whole concept of people not approaching it as an entrepreneurial venture is, I think, a little bit confusing to me. Because yes, you could, it's okay to be a hobbyist for sure. But if you want to make a game and you want to make some money from it, you should approach it like any other business. And I'm curious, this leads me to a question for you. Have you figured out how to build a game that, just like let's say a builder builds a house? Have you figured out how to schedule it out properly and estimate things properly and write a GDD or a plan where it's like, yes, these are the mechanics, these are the upgrades, these are the levels, these are the characters, and this is how it's going to be built? Or is it more explorative?
I'd say one of the strengths of our studio has been to set a creative vision very early on and respect that creative vision. And one of the reasons why is that there's this old Gamma Sutra article that came out a long time ago that was like it wasn't scientific, but it was a study of a whole bunch. It was called the Games Outcome Project. And they basically did a whole survey on a whole bunch of different games. And they tried to figure out what were the factors that led to a successful outcome.
Right.
And the successful outcome could be defined in different ways. A lot of the times commercial, sometimes Metacritic, whatever. And that study, I thought, was like one of the best articles to this day that I've ever read on game development. It was super interesting. And like their main conclusions were, the most important thing is that the creative vision doesn't massively change during production, that you have a very clear idea of what you want to do and you execute on that vision. And the other thing was team seniority, not necessarily the individual seniority of the team members, but the total seniority of that team working together.
What does that mean?
So like a team that's shipped multiple games together.
Oh, wow. So
Or
just
a team
experience.
that's been working, the experience working together, not just the individual experience, not like we're a bunch of seniors who are now going to work together. We're a bunch of people who work together over 5 to 10 years.
I see. So maintaining a company culture that encourages longevity, staying with the studio, benefits the products.
Yeah, and that's something that's always been, I'd say those two things that have been like super important to our success. And I think there was another thing in the Games Outcomes project, but I can't recall what it was exactly.
I see 4 here. Well, the first one's not really one of them, but it says effective teams. Crunch makes games worse. I don't know if you remember that part of it.
But yeah, so those two things is, okay, well, what do most big studios do? Well, they hire a bunch of people. they crunch them into the ground, and then when the game ships, they fire everyone.
Yep. Well, look at this, dude. Let me share my screen here so we can take a look at this together.
It came out. It's an old article. Like
but I'm sure,
old
dude. I'm sure that this is true with anything in tech. Like, here's one: average team size correlated against game project outcome.
But I remember that it was a series of articles, and there was one of the articles which was the kind of summary of everything. So there you can see team experience.
Yep. I mean,
it's a much stronger correlation, right?
Exactly. I mean, it seems obvious. You know what I mean? That you would want an experienced team.
Yeah, but a lot of stuff right underneath incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And
the first page of our survey also revealed two major surprises. The first surprise was financial incentives. The survey included a question: was a team offered any financial incentives tied to the performance of the game, the team, or your performance? We offered multiple checkboxes to say yes or no. The correlation is as follows. So what's the conclusion here? Let's see. Whatever the reason, our results seem to indicate that individually tailored incentives, such as pay for performance plans, seem to achieve meaningful results where royalties, team incentives, and other forms of financial incentives do not. So pay for performance for some reason was advantageous.
But anyways, it's definitely an article that's worth, reading. I should probably reread it.
Well, let's see. Where's it from? What year? I wonder if it's even relevant. That 2014, dude, decade old. I wonder if it's still relevant.
I mean, I'm sure it is. Like the actual practices of game dev, at least for premium games or the type of games that we make. Obviously, I'm sure if you're looking at free to play and stuff like that, it's different. It's a different type of production. It's a different type of thing. But
right.
For the types of games that we're making, I think it's probably not that different.
Right. And here's their conclusion. They say, our study found several surprises, including a complete lack of correlation between factors that one would assume should have a large impact, such as team size, game genre, target platforms, production methodology, or any additional financial incentives. So the things that most people think are like what drive a business: be bigger, pick the right genre, pick the right target platform. Although I just feel like if you were to not pick Steam, that's a huge mistake. Although I do. Well, are you guys not launching 33 Immortals on Steam?
So 33 Immortals is in early access, and we're exclusive to Epic right now. So without going into that, but
I got you.
We'll see what the future holds. But for now, we're Epic exclusive on PC.
Well, thank you, Epic. That's awesome for supporting your studio. That's great.
Absolutely.
So all these things that you would expect are like common advantages aren't really, at least according to this. Okay, and here's Grok's answer. My editor is probably going to kill me. He's like, "Why are you going all over the place, Thomas?" But I wanted to get an answer for our question, which is, how many indie studios make a second game? It seems like success on platforms like Steam is rare. Estimates suggest only 4% of indie games turn a meaningful profit. I feel like that's true. Even fewer, 0.5 to 7%, generate enough revenue to be financially viable. Indie games dominate releases. 98 to 99% of new titles are indie, with average first-year earnings per game around $16,000 or less. I forgot to read this. Approximately 25% of indie studios go on to release a second game, while 75% release only one. Does that surprise? I don't even know if this is true, by the way. I
don't know. I don't trust numbers coming from ChatGPT, or I don't know what Grok does, but the numbers are I don't trust them, but it definitely feels something like that. Yeah,
it does. It feels like it. So that's just sort of a rough feel. I think of ChatGPT and any LLM as sort of just like a vibe. They're like a general idea of that's
no for that they're fine. No, I mean, like in the mathematical sense, they're not mathematical models. So I literally don't trust any number that they put on screen.
Exactly.
Anything else like summaries or whatever, it can be great. It's a great tool, but for mathematical numbers, it's
I agree.
Complete fabrication. So.
Complete fabrication. It's a complete. You might be right,
but it seems very possible. It actually seems pretty high to me. I was expecting a lower number.
Yeah.
But so maybe it's not as bad as we think. Maybe independent developers just really like
Releasing one game and then being done.
yeah,
Know
no,
what you
or
mean?
just we like to say the sky is falling when
Yeah,
it isn't, you know, who
exactly.
knows?
Yep. Okay, so I want to shift gears here, and you're running a business, and you're both a creative person and you're both a business owner. You're an entrepreneur.
Right.
Let's talk really quick about the history of Thunder Lotus and just your game dev career. I like to ask this question. I'm going to start asking it more on the podcast. What was the hardest day for you as a game developer running Thunder Lotus? Can you remember it?
Yeah, I think the hardest day was the day we launched Sundered.
I
In the
figured you'd say
summer.
that.
Yeah, in the summer of 2017. But when we launched Sundered, basically we launched the game, and there can go as deep as you want into this, but basically the game was way too hard at launch, and the loading times were suboptimal. Were pretty long, pretty chunky loading times. So
What do you know how long that was specifically
sometimes it was like 2 minutes
for
to
Steam?
yeah, for Steam, yeah, to generate the levels and everything. It was very long.
Unity?
Uh, Unity, yeah, but
Yeah.
it had to do with how we were able to optimize though later. It was
It was
both of
probably the
those.
compression of the images, right? The 2D art.
No, I think a lot of it was how we were randomly generating the levels.
Okay.
So really way too hard and long loading times, and the game is a kind of like a mix between a Hollow Knight and Dead Cells. So it's a roguelike Metroidvania. So obviously the goal of the game is to die and restart and and
Yeah.
go through that loop. But when your loop is happening every like 2 minutes or 3 minutes because the game is too hard, and then your loading is 2 minutes because the loadings aren't optimized, then you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
Basically. And so we launched on a Friday. Right away, the Metacritic scores were lower than we were hoping. We had some decent scores.
I think you ended at a 7, right? 7
Yeah,
out of
we had
10?
some. We were
Metacritic?
mostly at 7.
I remember, dude, I remember that actually because I was following you and I was like really excited for you.
Yeah,
And I feel like it's okay to talk this way about this game now that you've
yeah,
had
absolutely.
Spiritfarer just completely vindicate you. But I feel like Sundered was tough for you guys because it was trying to follow up this small artsy game, which was
Jotun.
Jotun,
Yep.
and it had a small community that loved it on Kickstarter, and then Sundered comes out, and it seems like it was a complex game, more complex than Jotun, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it felt like you guys had, man, I hope I'm not saying mean things. It felt it
No,
felt
no,
like
go ahead.
it felt like
Honestly,
you had bitten off more than you could chew. And I'm not sure if that's true. It looks like you repaired the game's reputation because you're sitting at very positive now, which is awesome. Way to go.
yeah, absolutely. No, I'm happy. No offense taken, and I'm happy to jump into it. So that first weekend, we ended up negative in negative reviews on Steam.
Wow.
And so we were in the red on
Dude,
Steam.
I'm so sorry. That must have sucked.
Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. It was a rough couple days. And then Monday we patched it, but at that point it was too late, right? It was too late for the algorithm. It was too late for the mind share around the game. We'd had a good amount of influencers or streamers play the game and stuff, but with the loading times and everything, it was just like, it's kind of broken or whatever. One thing that definitely helped save the game at that point was that we had a deal with Sony, so we were console exclusive.
Wow.
So we launched Steam and PS4. So we'd had like 2 weeks of pre-orders before then, and we had a good amount of marketing support from Sony. So we were able to clear, like 10,000 units in the first week or something like that.
Wow. For PlayStation?
For I think all platforms combined.
Okay.
Which was it's not peak, but it was very decent. Still, so that helped us kind of pad that launch. And then the vindication didn't have to wait until Spiritfarer. I mean, we launched Eldritch Edition, which was the Switch and the Xbox version of the game, about 6 months later. And when we launched Eldritch Edition, we were at 90% positive on Steam. So it was hard because we were like, well, I wish we could go back and release that version of the game at launch, but obviously you can't. But fundamentally as well, I mean, what hurt Sundered was a bunch of mistakes, obviously, that led to that in terms of performance, in terms of game balancing, and all that, but also just the market too. Like,
Yeah.
When we started conception for Sundered right after we launched Jotun, so that would be like in October 2014, and at that point we're like, Metroidvanias are the next big thing, and like obviously we weren't the only small studio to kind of figure that out, and to see that in their crystal ball. So
when did Team Cherry release Hollow Knight relative to Sundered?
Exactly. So with into that 2017, before us, Hollow Knight launched and Dead Cells launched.
I see. So Hollow Knight was February and Sundered was July.
Yeah.
So you guys were right next to each other, basically.
And Dead Cells released before us too. And full kudos to them. Dead Cells and Hollow Knight were better games than Sundered. Like there's no doubt there. So we came in after both of those massive successes with a game that wasn't as good as either of them, with a messed up launch too there. So a lot of lessons there. But when the game launched and we saw the reviews starting in, it was a big kick to the stomach, and
But the problem with initial reviews, especially critic reviews, is that I'm pulling up a review here from Roger Ebert about Home Alone. And I'm not sure if Home Alone was big in Canada when you were growing up, but I'm sure it was. So here's a review from Roger Ebert about Home Alone in 1990, okay? Here's what he says. And by the way, this movie did not do well when it first came out, but he said...
Really? I didn't know that.
It didn't, no. Roger Ebert said, "I didn't enjoy the subplot involving the burglars." I highlighted that and posted on Twitter because I was like, that is literally the plot. And he said, he goes, he basically says, Home Alone should have limited itself to things that might possibly happen to an 8-year-old. I think I would have liked it more. So effectively, he's saying, like, I wish that Home Alone just showed more things that 8-year-olds do. Like, I guess, like playing Game Boy. Like, so the reason I'm bringing this up is when it comes to critical reviews, it's really hard. You need time. You need time to really tell you whether a product is good or not. Same is true with Great Gatsby. When Great Gatsby was released as a novel, nobody cared. I think it was only when F. Scott Fitzgerald died that book became popular.
Yeah, but you see, I would much rather put my studio in a position where our games come out and are universally acclaimed.
I know.
And then we don't have to wait till I die for them to have success,
I know, but your beautiful children could maybe, reap the rewards while you're in the grave,
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think part of that comes down to like business strategy as well. And a sentence that I've used a lot, or that we've used internally a lot over the years, is going viral is not a strategy, No. Like Peak, I think, is a great example, obviously Peak is a good game. Obviously Peak was put out by people who know what they're doing, with Aggro Crab and Landfall and all that. But I think if a lot of people look at Peak and are like, oh, this is what I should be doing, I think there's a lot of risk in that, because how many Game Jam games come out and don't have the success of Peak?
Yeah, it's like buying lottery tickets, and hoping that your game markets itself.
And what I'm seeing now from various publishers and investors and stuff is that they're willing to take that bet, sub $1 million, development budgets and all that, or they look at the success of Balatro or Peak or whatever, but they'll fund. If you're going that model, it's like a VC model. You have to fund 25 of those games, and 24 of them are going to fail. And then the 25th, hopefully you knock it out of the park and it pays for all of your failures and then some.
Yeah, but that sucks for the developers because they don't.
Exactly. That's not a good model for developers. No. There was I saw a newer studio who were making very small games and were having a lot of success on Twitch. There was a game with a guy looking at you in a hotel room, and like that was the whole game.
Are you talking about click holding?
I think so, yes.
And he's got a clicker?
Yes, I think so. But that's their strategy.
That's Strange Scaffold. That's Oliver Nelson Jr. He was on the podcast last year.
Right.
And that's their strategy. And that's his strategy. And what's funny though is that some of his games, they're like, they don't do great. I think one of them has like mixed reviews on Steam. And it's like, I kind of want to have that mentality of like, Or at least there's a part of me that wants to have that mentality where it's just like, just get the games done. Because that's what he was saying on the podcast. He was like, a released game is better than a great game. He said something like that. He'd rather release games and just get them done. Now, as I've aged out of that, I've learned a lot in the last 6 months since I've had that podcast. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. I actually disagree. I would much rather just make a really good game, even if that means I spend 3-4 years on it. It's not because it's a good business decision, but just because I don't think I can release a game that I don't think is perfect. Do you have any thoughts there?
Then that strategy isn't the right one for you.
Right.
Or, who knows? Maybe that, like, one thing that we often talk about in the studio is, imagine we were starting our studio today, how much harder it would be for us versus starting our studio in 2014, And I think part of that is true. Like, we definitely were able to ride the wave of the digital distribution wave, Steam opening up, indie games. We're not within the first indie games to come out, right? We're not within that first Braid, Fez hype. So we didn't ride that first wave, but we were still able to catch the kind of the tailwind or the end of that wave. And I think that
2016.
Yeah, something like that. I think that definitely helped us to get to the success where we are today. But I think Strange Scaffolding, you were saying the name of their studio.
Yeah, Strange Scaffold.
Strange Scaffold are a great example of a studio who have figured out how to have success in today's market, which is the TikTok market or whatever you want to call it, or the world, the gamers are very different today than they were 10 years ago, and 20-year-olds today are different than 20-year-olds 10 years ago. So I think you need to kind of adapt your strategy. You can adapt your strategy to who you are, and like you said, I'm an artist. I want to spend 3 or 4 years on this game, make it the best that it can be, and deliver it. Or you could have that, that kind of spray and pray approach, which is more akin to mobile games, which is really interesting because, I started my career in mobile games as a mobile game designer. I worked for 2.5 years, and we actually started making Facebook games. So we started making Farmville type games, then moved to like premium Angry Birds, Fruit Ninja type games, and then moved to free to play because the free to play kind of happened after that and was the big thing. But there's a lot of similarities between, or you can take a lot of the learnings from the mobile market, and what a mess that is and became, and bring those towards Steam, which is honestly a big mess, or the whole, not just Steam, but just the general games market today, and how competitive it is, and how hard it is to get to visibility and all that. So,
well, Will, I'm curious what your thoughts are with this. I feel like with the advent of AI and like the TikTok mentality, the friend slop mentality. Have you heard of friend slop?
Peak, basically.
Is peak another way of saying it?
Or no, well, the peak is like friend. It's like just a crazy game that you can play with your friends type thing.
Oh, right. Yes. I don't want to call peak friend slop because I haven't played it and I don't know.
Right.
But I do know what friend slop is. And friend slop is, according to Google's AI, slang term, just this for the audience listening, low budget indie cooperative games that are primarily designed for players to have fun with friends rather than deep gameplay. Now, my theory is that because this stuff is coming out so much, that to make something that's narrative and deep and handcrafted is, well, it's scarce. Therefore, the demand is high. I would say you guys make those kind of games. They feel handcrafted. They're deep. There's narrative behind them, and there's a ton of intention behind them. And I feel like that is a much better approach. It's like shooting for the moon, right? You're going as hard as you can to make the most polished possible game. That's my goal, because I don't even want to play in this. Like I think about the indie game industry as like a hedge maze, and everybody's in the hedge maze, and I'm like, I'm not getting in that hedge maze. I do not want to be in there making friend slop and trying to make the next Vampire Survivor or whatever's popular right now. I'm just not even going to try. I'm going to stay outside the hedge maze and create something that's polished and beautiful, that has my thumbprint, that no one else can replicate. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'm trying to read Rick Rubin's book right now, which is called something. Anyways, it's basically his musings.
Is it called
on...
something? Let's see.
No, it's
The
I don't
Way of
remember the
Code?
title.
Is it the Way of Code is his website? The Creative Act, a way of being.
Creative Act. So it's basically and I'm saying trying to read because honestly, it's not my favorite book. I really enjoy watching Rick Rubin or listen to his podcasting or his interviews and all that. He's a super interesting guy. Obviously, been around for a whole bunch of different things, and his approach is super interesting, which is why I want to finish his book. But basically, his view is that it's great to compare games to other medium, and if you look at music is far more saturated as a medium than games are. If you talk about AI, look at the fake Deep Purple band that came out and is generating millions of views, whatever. I think it's interesting. But what Rick Rubin says is basically that the music that comes from an artist is important because it comes from an artist. And it's important because it comes from that artist in particular. And we're just kind of conduits for the universe, making magic happen within us as musicians. And what's interesting is to hear that musician's interpretation of whatever that creative force is. So that's kind of like the whole premise of his creativity, basically. And I think it's super interesting because, and this is actually a discussion that I had with Nico, who's the creative director on Spiritfarer and the creative director on At Fate's End now, was when we were, after Spiritfarer, thinking about what the next game was. It was like, okay, well, there are different ways that we can go about this. We can go about this trying to figure out what the future is, what genres are going to become popular in the future, what kind of opportunities there are from a marketing standpoint, from a market standpoint, or an audience standpoint, or what do we think Nintendo or Microsoft or Sony are going to want in a couple of years, or what are our opportunities, from a distribution standpoint, Game Pass or Epic or whatever going forward. But one of the things we were saying too was like, well, or we could just make a game and we can make we're going to make it ourselves. So Thunder Lotus is going to make that game, and therefore it's going to be a Thunder Lotus game. And what does that mean? And that's actually another, sorry, I'm just opening up a whole bunch of tangents. This is great.
I think I know what you're about to say, and I love it.
But the side tangent is 33 Immortals, because 33 Immortals is a second production team. And when we started 33 Immortals, it was a team of 0 in the studio. We rebuilt an entire production team from scratch in parallel to the Spiritfarer team at the time. And we went through a lot of those questions of culture, of branding, of, okay, what is a Thunder Lotus game? Because it was really important to me that when 33 Immortals came out, it was not the first game from a new team at Thunder Lotus. It was Thunder Lotus's next game. And I think we accomplished that. But because the people you have on your team will influence the result, especially when you're in a small team. Like we were around 15 people, between 15 and 20 people on our productions. So when you're that few people on a team, then the influence that each person has on the result of the game is going to be enormous. And obviously, as team size goes down, that percentage and that impact goes up. So it's kind of impossible to dissociate the people who are making the game in the context of obviously like more artistic endeavors, like more like or premium games. If you're talking about free to play, you're talking about AAA. Obviously, that's kind of out the window. I'm talking about things from our perspective. But so it's very much influenced by the people you make, and your voice is important, and that comes down to who you are as a creator, who you are, and people are gonna like who you are, and that obviously what I'm talking. This is 10 years in the making. Like this is a lot of work and a lot of consistent results throughout the years, and a lot of focus on what's important for us as a studio and the type of games we make and the reputation we've built up. But it's impossible to dissociate those things, and that voice is important, and that voice can be kind of what makes things different. Coming back to Rick Rubin, that's why I wanted to get back to Rick Rubin, is that your voice as a game creator can be your interpretation of the world, and therefore can have value and can set you apart, and should set you apart, and it should be it should be like important if you're making, you know, the types of games that we make.
I'm curious. I feel like when I look at your portfolio, you guys have clear vision about what your brand is. Your games all have almost the exact same look. I'd say Jotun looks a little bit different than the other ones. Sundered was a bit of a departure from the Jotun look, I felt. But overall, on average, you've got a pretty solid looking portfolio. Is that something you can build to sell? I'm not saying you're gonna, but I'm just saying in general, because I think about a lot of my friends, they build construction companies and then they sell to construction company, you know? With games, I'm curious, is that difficult to do, to build something to sell, to build a brand to sell?
I'd say that's oftentimes the, you know, if you're talking about non-solo devs, I'd say it's a pretty common, not common, it doesn't happen often that you sell, but like if we look back over the last 5 years, there's been enormous amounts of acquisitions, and then throughout 2020 and the pandemic and all that, it was kind of the craziness. So yeah, you can sell your company as a game studio. There are plenty of examples who've done it, and generally what I've seen is that it's either people are buying a team. So like in the case of Bungie selling to Sony are saying, well, we want to buy the team that made Destiny. They're also buying the IP. They're like, oh, we want to own Destiny. So the IP has value if to an acquirer, if it has value, you know, by itself, either monetarily through sequels and stuff, or because it's strategic for them, they wanted to get into that part of the business or whatever. Or you're selling your company based on a multiple of EBITDA, and you're, you know, a profitable company, and a bigger company are like, well, we want to, you know, bring that into our balance sheet and take that over type thing. But I don't know, maybe this is too financial, but like, you know, I think you can sell your company for a bunch of different reasons. A lot of people, not a lot of people do. Some people do. Obviously, there aren't that many acquisitions going on right now in the state of the world. But
the reason I ask is because, of course, I mean, I didn't have that mindset when I was in my 20s. I was like, I just want to. The idea of even making games full time alone is a huge stretch for a lot of people. A lot of people listening right now, they think that that's impossible. You know, but the next step is, well, how do I build a studio and a brand that's it's a product in and of itself that can eventually be sold? Because the older I get, the more I meet people my age who have done that. You know, they've built something that not only is the products they create available for sale, but the studio itself can be sold. It definitely sounds sleazy or like too corporate, but it's like, you're putting all your money into this studio. At least make it something that's can be sold one day, you know, for your family.
Right. Yeah. I personally hope to never sell Thunder Lotus and to make a lot of money through the successes that we have within our studio. So from the games themselves, I think we have an industry that allows that. If you have games that generate a lot of money, then obviously that can be shared with the team, that can be shared with the shareholders, that can go back to the founder, that can go back to, you can reinvest in future projects. You can share the profits with your team. You can share your revenue with your team, which is what we do at the studio. And therefore, if our games have enormous success, that is shared within the team. So I think that's super important for sustainability, from a sustainability standpoint, because if you sell your studio, chances are 5 years down the line, that studio no longer exists, which is, you know, you're going to cash out. You can share that money with the employees, and people generally do pay out big bonuses and stuff like that. But you don't necessarily have to. If you build a machine that builds successful games, you don't have to sell in order to achieve that financial goal, you know. So that's kind of that's more like where my hopes and dreams are, is like, let's keep this going for as long as possible and make the best games possible, and then, you know, make sure that the people who are making the games are getting rewarded for that.
Can I segue to another question? Do you have time? Maybe 20 more minutes? Okay. I'm so glad you said that, because I'm sitting here going, what made Spiritfarer so successful? And Sundered, not so much. I'm curious if we could compare them And the goal here, Will, would be to help the audience understand when to pour their when to pour their money and their time into a product, to know that it's probably going to be successful, right? And so I just would love to glean from you. What did you learn from Spiritfarer, and what did you learn from Sundered?
Yeah, so I think every book, a book that every entrepreneur or someone who starts a venture or creative or games or whatever, they should read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. I don't know how to spell his last name, how to say his last name, but I just reread it. It's an amazing book. The summary is basically the scientific method: hypothesis, test, conclusion, and that's your loop. It's the scientific method. Obviously, the book goes into much more detail into how you actually implement that, what it means for a tech startup. He actually had a company making a MMO avatar chat thing, kind of like Second Life, in the early 2000s, I think, or something. So anyway, super, super interesting. That's kind of like, go read that. That is like the first way of how do you make great things without over investing, or making sure that you're actually building the right thing. I think that's a great resource. For Thunder Lotus and for Sundered to Spiritfarer, I would go back to Jotun to Sundered.
Yeah.
So after we shipped Jotun, we looked at Jotun, we said, okay, what went well, what didn't go well? So the things that worked well for Jotun were the hand-drawn art, the immersion, the music, the authentic take on Norse mythology, and the boss fights. Those are like the three main things that worked really well. And what didn't work well with Jotun was, the levels in between the boss fights were really quite boring. It wasn't great game design. There wasn't a lot of stuff there. It was what it was. It was a short game and with the resources we had, but that's definitely one of the low points of the experience. We had a decent amount of YouTubers and streamers pick up the game at launch and play the game, but they played for 5 hours and then finished the game, and so therefore stopped playing it, stopped sharing it. So we'd gotten our foot in the door, but we weren't able to keep that door open for very long. And then the last thing was people who watched people playing Jotun, people who watched streamers or influencers, kind of got the whole experience of the game because it's a single player narrative, very linear experience. So why would I go buy it? I kind of can watch my favorite streamer, they go through the whole thing, and if I bought it and played it, I'd have literally the same experience, unless I really wanted the challenge of the boss fights.
Was there anything variable about it other than the player choosing certain weapons? And
no, not really.
Okay. There was a separate pathing, or
you could choose the order in which you did the bosses, but ultimately it didn't change.
So that's kind of like, what would you say, Dark Souls kind of? I feel like Dark Souls is, I refuse to play Dark Souls because it makes me angry, but I feel like...
Yeah, I'm the same. I've tried many times and have...
But I think you could choose certain bosses. You could choose certain paths at the beginning, but at the end of the day, everybody's going to play the same amount. They're going to all do the same thing.
Exactly. So in that sense, it didn't really have a material impact on your experience. So those we took, and those you can see how those translated to Sundered. The resist or embrace, where you can choose to corrupt your abilities or not, and then really have an impact. The skill tree, all these player choices, all these different things, these different paths, which you can have a different experience while you're playing. Multiple endings, the roguelike aspect where you die and you play a lot, that was also in order to kind of buffer out the total play time, so that if streamers did pick up the game, they could play longer, increase our exposure, and that kind of went from there. And then the stuff that we kept, obviously the art style, H.P. Lovecraft was that same sort of creative technique where we said, okay, this is super cool inspiration, let's bring it in. The big bosses, we made them even bigger and Sundered even crazier, and that was a super cool part of the game too. So that's how we kind of went from Jotun to Sundered. And then when we launched Sundered, as I said, like the tough launch and the difficulty of the game and the combat and everything, we were like, we're never making a combat game ever again. Let's make a game without any combat. We're done. Joe, our art director, was like, Will, I am not drawing darkness anymore. Like, I'm sick and tired of your heavy metal inspirations. I don't care about them. I know you like them, but like I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brought us to Spiritfarer, where it was like, okay, well, more playtime definitely was great. More player choice was awesome. But let's do a 180 in terms of theme and in terms of gameplay. Let's do a game with no combat. And so we said, okay, that's kind of our starting point. Then we were inspired by the Hotel and Spirited Away. We were inspired by Stardew Valley. We were inspired by Undertale in terms of character development and all that. Brought all those things together. And then a huge change on the team was me stepping away from creative direction. At that point, after Sundered, the team was like, Will, you can't be creative director anymore. I had become a bottleneck to production. There was too much stuff going on the marketing side, on the business side. And at that point, I stepped out of production and we hired Nico Guérin, who ended up replacing me as creative director on Spiritfarer. And then he brought the whole narrative aspect and everything to Spiritfarer, brought it to the next level and brought it really elsewhere and made it the game and that it became.
Can I ask you a question about that, stepping down like that? So like You're the owner, right, of Thunder Lotus?
Yep. I have a co-founder and we actually have a minority investment as well, but I'm still a majority board.
So did that hurt you?
Yeah, it comes back to what I was saying before about identity and all of that. Yeah, it had a huge impact on me. It left a huge hole inside of me, really. Stepping away from that, it was the right thing for the business. And as you can probably tell by our conversation, I enjoy the business side of things. I like that. I like the entrepreneurial side of things, but the creative side is also super important to me. And even though it was the right thing to do and the right move, it was very hard for me. And that was one of the low points also throughout my career. And like the whole thing about personal identity and being like, okay, well, now I've stepped away from this role. I'm no longer creative director. What am I doing? I'm just waiting for the game to come out now. I'm going to wait for 3 years and do nothing. And so, psychotherapy, a lot of stuff, but also second production team, filling that hole with something else. And obviously that was part of that.
I just want to say really quick, Will, like last time you and I talked, you were counseling me on Kickstarter in 2017, I think it was 2018, one of those years.
Right.
And I remember that conversation very well. You probably don't remember it, but I do, because I was trying to get something.
I remember we talked. I don't remember.
No, but I remember it very clearly because I was gleaning everything I could because I was in panic mode and needed to get this Kickstarter funded. So I remember everything about it. And I just want to say, you are totally different. I feel like you're totally different than when I talked to you.
Really?
Yeah, like 6-7 years ago. You're just different, man. Like you're very chill. At the time you felt very, and I was this way too. In your 20s, you want to change the world. You feel like you want to be like I wanted to be like the savior of the world. I'm going to make the greatest things ever. And now you're so chill. And I just wanted to say that psychotherapy seemed to help.
Definitely. Yeah. I definitely recommend it to everyone. There's huge stigmas around it, but obviously psychologists know what they're doing and they will help you, know thyself.
Well, I do want to say though, related to your old self, I'm looking at Sundered right now. Okay. You turn the ship around. You're very positive. I'm assuming the game made millions or $1 million plus. You don't have to answer. You can answer. My editor will.
The game was profitable. The game did end up making more than its production budget.
Okay. So you made money. You made a game that people love. We're sitting at 2,000 plus reviews on Steam for the Eldritch Edition. Point being, clearly you're a good creative director, right? Wouldn't you say? Now,
well, thank you.
I feel like it.
We have a good team. We have a lot of people working on the team. And
I
stuff,
know.
But,
you're being humble.
Without going into too many details, there might be something coming in the near future.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask you, because I was actually talking. Do you know Serenity Forge at all?
Yes, I haven't talked to them in a very long time, but
Z is now in a creative role. So, and I guess I should ask him if I can say this, but he's now in a creative role and less in an administrative or like C-level role, and he feels a sense of freedom. Like he's able to get back into the creative world. And so I'm curious if you feel that way, and you don't have to answer because I know you got a team who are probably going to watch this podcast and you don't want to discourage them. But I'm curious if you miss being on the creative side of things. You mentioned in the email, and again, I can cut all of this, but you mentioned in the email, you haven't opened Unity since 2017.
Right.
Do you miss that? You know?
I don't miss Unity. I do not miss Unity. I have a bachelor in computer science with a double major in computation arts, but like I hated programming. Like I do not miss that one bit. But I've been since 2017 is when Nico joined us. I've been in much more of a strategic role, just kind of accompanying our productions with our producers and creative directors, and a lot on the marketing side, and then figuring out what our business strategy is, and figure out like how we grow as a studio and all that, because we're 50 people now, so it's a pretty big machine at this point.
Yeah.
But I'd say that I am a macro manager. I am the opposite of a micromanager. So I really believe in the autonomy of our teams.
Mm-hmm.
I try and empower people to be able to do the best that they can do. They're much, they know what they're doing. We have great people in the studio and across different parts of the business. But that means that I've kind of been, not telling people what to do, but more on the sidelines and analyzing and critiquing more than actually doing for the last, 7 or 8 years, and telling people, oh, this has to be better, or and ultimately just accompanying people in our teams in that perspective. So yeah, I think it's probably time for me to to prove that I still have it, and to jump back in at some point. But yeah, that would be great.
But you're not going to open up Unity. You're going to open up Godot. I feel like you strike me as a Godot guy. I don't know why.
I wish. But no, every time we've looked at it, it's not quite there for our needs.
Okay, dude. I think that's the podcast. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here. That was a lot of fun, dude. I'd love to have you on again. You're really easy to talk to.
Thank you. Well, so are you. Very, very welcoming and very easy.
Appreciate it, man. Okay, so anything you want to leave in the description to point listeners to?
No, just check out our games, thunderlotusgames.com.
All right. I'll put that in the description, Will. But that is...
Maybe our At Fate's End Steam page.
Yes. Oh, by the way, it looks awesome. I love the cover art. Sword
the cover art. Yeah, that's a nice piece. That's a nice illustration. That's a very nice piece of art. Again, it's our team is amazing. And, the through line you were talking about is because of the artists that we have.
Yeah. All right, bud. Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye. And that brings me to Skywork, today's sponsor. Skywork is an AI platform that feels like having an entire creative team inside of a single app. I honestly can't think of a more dynamic career than game development. You kind of have to juggle everything from actual development, right? All the way to just business stuff, creating pitch decks, documents, and spreadsheets. Skywork connects all of this. All of these things you're juggling into a single workflow. You can simply drop in an idea and instantly get a script or a polished document, full slides, and even a web page ready to share. As game devs, we know how much time disappears switching between apps, rewriting content, or just researching. Skywork, it simplifies this and ultimately takes that pain right away. It's kind of like hitting, fast forward on all of your creative processes so you can stay focused on building your game instead of juggling dozens of other tools and tasks. Try it yourself today with the link in the description or the pinned comment, and you get access to the exclusive offer for this channel.